All right, so you have chosen the tilt shift miniature effect as one of your camera assignments for photo 2. And this is a great effect in either in camera or in Photoshop. So I'll show you after this how to set it up in your Photoshop in order to capture this miniaturized effect. So tilt shift is based on the concept of using a lens that is specifically for medium format photography, which captures a picture not in line with your picture plane or your film plane. So this was originally in like film photography, and then in digital, they make special tilt shift lenses like the one above that changes that. Instead of being parallel with the lens or with the film plane, it is at an angle. So it captures like the appearance of shallow depth of field on something that would normally be really great depth of field, like a high vantage point, like a sports scene, like a, you know, where the people are blurred, you can tell in the foreground and in the background. So it creates this forced perspective of this almost miniaturized effect, like they're little tiny players in, you know, a set that you might have designed that's like 1/4 scale or something like that. So it's a shallow depth of field effect in a picture that ordinarily only has great depth of field possible, no matter what lens you're using, unless it's the tilt shift lens. So these lenses are great for architecture and taking pictures of landscape photography in order to actually get rid of the distortion. So it compensates, and artistic photographers have used this in order to capture this really interesting effect of that shallow depth of field blur. So they're almost using the lenses in the wrong way in order to create creative effects. So one photographer that really uses this to the creative extent, he does fine art photography with this tilt shift effect, is Vincent Lafrey. And he's a Los Angeles, New York based photographer who takes aerial pictures. So he's in a helicopter taking pictures with an actual tilt shift lens. So that's how you get the really beautiful bokeh effect in both the foreground and the background of his photographs, making these you know, larger than life, way zoomed out, way wide angle scenes of New York and Los Angeles. He captures them with that tilt shift effect, creating that miniaturized effect as if these are just tiny little built models of cities instead of something that is in real life. So the colors are beautiful that he captures because he does them usually at the time of day where you know, it's nighttime photography. So he's using lights, he's using that bokeh effect in order to create those pin light effects with the circles of the aperture, and he's using an actual tilt shift lens. But again, I'll show you at the end of this demonstration how to create that in Photoshop. Another photographer that uses the tilt shift effect is Australian fine artist Ben Thomas. So he does what's called a city shrinker series, where he captures from a high vantage point. That's really the key for these photographs, is they have to be from a really high vantage point. Otherwise, if you're more in line with the people in the city, it might be not as realistic of an effect if you blur the foreground and the background and leave the middle ground really clear. So here these people look like they're tiny. So by using this depth of field effect, he shrinks the appearance of these cities, and you can see the blur in the foreground, and even in the background here, just kind of selectively blurs the water and then leaves the buildings in focus. So this is something that you can simulate in Photoshop by selecting the buildings and making them stand out from the background that's blurry. So I'll kind of show you how to do that. Okay, another photographer, or there's another example from a city shrinker series, like, you know, carnivals make great examples, city scenes, street scenes, cars at night, you know, kind of passing under a bridge or an overhang. Anything, if you can get at like a high vantage point in the school and take a picture of a parking lot that way, anything where you have the ability to have a high vantage point can create this effect really well. Okay, Walter Loss is a Sports Illustrated photographer, and he's been working for several decades in the field of sports photography and athletes. He captures portraits with the shallow depth of field effect, this tilt shift effect. So you could do this by selecting the face of your portrait and then making everything else blurry. So it really focuses us in on the close-up facial features and expression of your subjects. Or you can, again, capture like a sports scene. I don't know if there's going to be any sports scenes going on. It's 2020, but anything that you can capture with people on a street or cars moving from like a high vantage point. But anyway, he's captured some of the greatest athletes, including Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, Muhammad Ali, among many others in his special type of photography, where he's also using that tilt shift lens to create that effect to really help focus us in on the action in the photograph instead of getting lost in like the details of the crowd or the foreground. So this is called a gradient blur effect as well in Photoshop. So you might be able to look up a tutorial. Here's an effect, the original photograph that you would take would be with great depth of field, and then using Photoshop, you can simulate this tilt shift effect really well, that miniature effect that we've been looking at throughout this presentation. So you would need to first select your photograph that you want to make with the tilt shift effect, open it in Photoshop, and then you add what's called like a quick mask, and then it goes into quick mask mode. It's red wherever you drag out a gradient, and then whenever you click on it again, it will render that as a selection. So you should use a reflective gradient in order to select just the middle. So it means it's going to drop off at the bottom and drop off at the top, and it's only going to have the center selected with a gradient on either side, above and below your selection. So it's going to be sort of like this gradient blur effect as you blur the layer beneath it. So we'll look at that in just a second. Okay, so your assignment is to capture 100 photos with this, tilt shift idea in mind. So think of capturing things from a high vantage point, things with architectural details, scenes where you have multiple buildings in one picture. So zooming out, having that sense of great depth of field is going to be the best for these photographs. So that means if you're using your DSLR camera, you might want to use an f/16 or f/22. Or something small, so you can get that great depth of field first, and then you're going to blur it creatively in Photoshop using this tilt shift effect as your inspiration. So you're going to make 5 of your images have that tilt shift effect, and something creative that you can do is then going in Photoshop, you can give one of your tilt shift images a surreal element. So this could be like a giant cat walking in the background, or like a shoe about to squash a building. You could add some kind of surreal, like, eyeballs to the clouds in the sky, or wings on, one of the people to make them look otherworldly. You could add unusual objects, that aren't usually seen in a city scene, but if it's a miniature, maybe there's something unusual sitting in the scene, like a giant shoe, or some other kind of like a tennis ball, or something that helps to add to that miniature effect in a surreal way. And then here's just an example. It could be hand drawn, it could be created in like a graphics program, created on your computer. You can use something from another photograph that you've taken, add unusual colors to your miniaturized scene. Think about juxtaposition and contrast. So what will make your surreal element really stand out? Where should you put it? How is it going to be interacting with the miniature scene that you've created? And think of, maybe having a theme within your photographs, or having a lot of variety is also okay too. So I'm going to go ahead and show a demonstration of how to do this tilt shift effect. So in Photoshop here, I've opened a photo of, let's see if I can make this small. Kind of. I think I'm still sharing my screen. I'm not. Okay. There we go. So in Photoshop, I have the background here selected. I'm going to make a copy. So I always want to start by making a copy of my background layer. And then in order to add this effect, you're going to use the gradient tool in this quick mask mode. So if you go down here below the fill and the, or the background of the foreground color, you can click on quick mask mode, and you notice that your layer goes into this like light red color. So this is showing that you're going to be telling Photoshop where you want to make a selection within this quick mask mode. So it's like an easy way of, you know, really quickly going into the refine edge option when you're making a selection. So using my gradient, I'm going to be on reflective gradient up here. So it looks like a stripe down the middle, and then the two sides are kind of blurred out. So I'm just going to drag from the center down until I get a selection that I like. So I really, wherever it's red is going to be the part that's in focus in your photograph. So I've sort of selected this area here. I can see it falls off towards the top and towards the bottom. So if I now exit quick mask mode, it's going to render that as a selection. So when I click on that button again, I see my selection here, and you can't really tell, but it is blurring at the top and at the bottom as it falls off with a gradient, with a reflective gradient. So the middle part's going to be in focus. So I'm just going to choose edit, copy, and edit, paste. And then I can see what I have on that layer 1. I just have these players in focus, and I might even want to go back in and try that again and maybe get a little bit of a thicker section. With my quick mask mode, I might show you that again because it doesn't hurt. So I'm going to put in quick mask mode again, get my reflective gradient, and then I'm going to start here and drag all the way down to maybe like a third of the way, so I can really see. Command C, Command V. Oh, hold on. First I have to take it out of quick mask mode. There's several different steps that you have to remember. So put it in quick mask mode, drag your gradient, take it out of quick mask mode, and then you're going to copy and paste. So edit, copy, edit, paste, and there it is. Let's see what I have selected. A little bit more this time is going to be in focus. So now I just take this background copy, and I'm going to add a blur. So if I go up to filter, blur, I'm going to choose lens blur as my type. And then you can increase the radius however much you want. You're kind of looking for those little circles. This isn't points of light, so they're not going to be perfect circles like the bokeh effect, but they will be out of focus and blurry. Even the arch back here, you can see it kind of gives that miniaturized effect. And now we can really see the players in focus, and everything else is out of focus. So this creates a really great candidate for using that shallow depth of field, tilt shift, lens blur, gradient blur effect in a great depth of field photograph to really highlight the details that you want your viewers to focus on in almost an unnatural way. So it really adds to the creativity level of your scene, of your photograph, keeping our eye right where it needs to be, right in the middle on the action when it's at its peak. So thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing what tilt shift effects you come up with.